everybody. Welcome to one of the first of the Bounty Honeys podcasts. This is Comic Corner. I am Kasey. Next to me is Kristi. And we are going to be your guide into all things Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, etc. We love it all. And we'll first start out by telling you a little bit about how we got into comics. I started with the OG Marvel movies way back in the day, but started with the bad Hulk movies and the TV show, and then really got into it with the 2008 Iron Man movie, and then kind of deep dived into the rest of that world, especially with Cap. So, and I am a bit of a fan of DC, but not as hardcore as Marvel, although I have recently fallen in love with the Umbrella Academy, like everybody else. So, that is me.
Okay, well, I'm Kristi. As a kid, I would read, like, Archie's comics. That was my jam. And it was actually one of the things that my dad and I would do together is go see all the new Batman movies. And those are like Michael Keaton era Batman. And so I grew up watching all of those. And then same as you, I started, like, I saw the Hulk movie. I saw Iron Man, loved it. I've seen everything in the MCU, TV shows and movies. I've seen it all. I'm actually very big into DC. Batman was my gateway for that, but like I watch all of the CW shows, so Supergirl, Arrow, The Flash, and for me, as I get invested in something having to do with comic books, I want to know more about the character and the backstory, so I kind of backwards go into the comics that way. So I've seen more comic TV shows and comic movies than I have read actual paper comics.
Same. I tend to get invested within a film and then go, okay, how are they pulling from different comics? For example, my first one I really dived deep into was the Civil War series, because that is such a phenomenal movie, even though they tweaked it slightly for the film, which I get because, you know, Spider-Man wasn't a thing in the MCU at that point. But yeah, especially getting into WandaVision, which we will discuss in depth in a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Really one of the first ones where they pulled from a bunch of comic lines and it's become very apparent. So yeah, super pumped.
I think like that kind of getting into the story and not really knowing where it goes, I think that happened a lot with the X-Men movies that came out early 2000s, which again, loved, but you didn't know who these X-Men were. And in some cases they were changing their backstory, they were changing their powers. And so you didn't really get a sense of the character. And so you'd really dive into like who somebody is, their relationships, where they'd go in the comic series. So it's really like getting interested in one particular character, one particular franchise, or one storyline lets you open up all these other avenues to find out so much more about it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. And even like the new X-Men movies that they did in the late 2010s, yeah, they've been kind of up and down as far as quality goes, unfortunately. But you know, greatest day of my life was when you had Charles and Charles talking to each other. Oh, so good.
I gotta say, I love the actors in those movies, especially. That's what made it for me. Oh, yeah. They had amazing casting.
Across the board. Like, even for both of them. Like, I like a lot of the new cast. I think they got shortchanged in a lot of the ways by bad writing, bad directing, just, you know, there was a lot of things. Like, I saw the Dark Phoenix movie and I went, it can't be as bad as everyone's saying. Oh boy, was I wrong.
Yeah.
You know, why they thought that, you know, okay, let's give the directing to the remake of the guy who originally wrote the first bad one. Just seemed like a bad idea.
Well, if we're talking bad writing, then you have to mention Justice League with the same breath. Like, why can't DC get a good movie together?
DC needs to stick to animation. They are very, very good at animation.
Mhm.
You know.
I love their live TV shows.
Yep.
Like with their crossover events, if they just filmed a 2-hour crossover event and called it a Justice League movie, it would be amazing.
Yeah. I mean, honestly,
but then you try to put it in a movie theater and it just doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean, I liked Wonder Woman 1984. It had some major issues, though.
Yeah, I think what it is like the storylines. Okay, so they're a little clunky, but you can get past that. But they don't. The special effects just don't seem at all realistic.
No,
you know,
not at all.
If you go to Marvel and you have somebody who can fly, it feels like that person can fly. Wonder Woman, it didn't feel like she was flying. Like her awkward jumps and stuff. Yeah, it just it's not the same.
It was weird. But I think they're making strides to fix that, you know.
I hope.
February 14th supposedly is supposed to be the Snyder Cut trailer drop date, which we will be reacting to because, oh my gosh, does that look amazing?
That'll be good.
But hopefully that will fix some stuff. But yeah, DC's got some issues.
Yeah. So I think we have established that we are geeks.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%.
If that was ever in any doubt.
Yeah.
We are nerds.
You know,
it's cool.
We also, you know, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Doctor Who, Star Trek,
Doctor Who. I am as big of a Star Wars nerd as I am a Star Trek nerd. I am very weird in this universe because so many people like heavily lean towards one or the other. But yeah, I have Star Wars named dogs, and I fall asleep watching Star Trek every night. Like,
hey,
I cover the gamut.
Star Wars, so I'm right there with you. All right, so real quick, we're gonna get into some news, and then we will break down the thing that we all are super pumped about, which is WandaVision and all of its wonderful, crazy insanity. So, on the Marvel side of things, the big thing to come out this week was the fact that Ryan Coogler, I can't speak. Proximity Media has a exclusive deal with Disney now. So, it means a couple of things. The big thing is that he will be producing a Wakanda TV show for Disney Plus. So, yay, nice. More Disney Plus content. So that'll be exciting. There's also talk that he will be working on some other stuff for them. But super pumped to see what they're going to do. But their goal is to control basically everything. So from film to TV to soundtrack to podcast, and kind of weave that all together within one cohesive storyline. So that'll be really interesting going forward, what they're going to do. Probably going to be looking at some fictionalized podcast series in addition to, you know, Ludwig having all of the music storyline composing throughout, who honestly looks to be the new John Williams, Hans Zimmer. So super pumped about that.
Very cool.
You know, it'll be interesting. I think
Black Panther. This is really with the unfortunate passing of Chadwick Boseman. I think that you really have to look at Wakanda in a different way.
Yeah.
And a TV show, I think, will really let you get into some of those side characters without feeling like you need somebody to anchor it.
Yeah.
Because you can have like the war dogs. You could have stories involving different war dogs that maybe only lasts a half-hour episode. And I think that would be a really great way to flesh out the entire country and really get to know some of those people.
Well, yeah, and especially with, they've already said that Shuri will be taking over the mantle of Black Panther. And while I wouldn't mind a Shuri, oh my gosh, I can't think of the general's name.
Okoye?
Yeah, thank you. And Lupita Nyong'o's character. I'm really bad with character names at the moment. You know, while I would love one centered around those three, you need a male presence to balance it out a little bit, so you don't, you know, alienate half of your audience. So
to talk about the elephant in the room, female-centered movies, whereas they can be amazing, you're always going to have some backlash of people that are like, oh, we don't want to watch a girl superhero. Well, girls can be superheroes too, damn it.
Yeah,
And
don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm
like,
all for
we
girl
can
power.
love it, but you're also going to have people that are like, I'm not going to watch it because it's all girls.
Yeah.
Well, girls have watched boy superheroes for long enough. It'll be amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
But I do like balance as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think the smart move would be to bring in M'Baku as that kind of balance.
Yeah.
And, you know, we'll see what they do. Unfortunately, anytime you have someone unfortunately passing, it does throw a kink into everything. So,
Yeah.
it'll be interesting.
Especially with a franchise like Marvel that has been planned out years in advance, and we just don't know where they're going.
Yeah. Well, and they kind of got lucky because after Phase 3 and after Endgame, they took some time and went, okay, we're only going to do like one arc at a time. And the current one that they're on is the WandaVision, Spider-Man 3, Doctor Strange 2 arc. Yeah. So that'll be good. They've got some time. I believe the next Black Panther is not scheduled for release until like 2024, 2023, something like that. So they've got a little bit of time to figure that out.
Yeah.
So that'll be helpful. On the DC side of things, they have announced the casting for Neil Gaiman's The Sandman TV show. So
very cool. Which I didn't even know was coming out. Like, this is news to me.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I don't think I've read this one. I've read some of his other books. Like, I've read Good Omens. I'm working through American Gods right now. And I love his stuff. If you haven't seen the Good Omens TV show, fantastic.
I haven't yet. It's on my list.
Oh, it's so good.
I know. I'm so far behind.
David Tennant and Michael Sheen together are just perfect.
David Tennant was the best Doctor Who.
My doctor's Matt Smith, but I concede your point.
Okay, so Matt Smith is my second favorite. So
there you go. So they've announced the principal cast, and Tom Sturges will be playing the Lord of Dreaming. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna butcher this name. Vivian Omenchangpon is going to be playing Lucine, the librarian of dreaming. Charles Dance will be Roderick Burgess, the charlatan and magician. Sanjeev Bhaskar is Kane. Asim Chaudhary is Abel. Boyd Holbrook is the Corinthian. And for all of us Star Wars nerds, Gwendolyn Christie is Lucifer. I am so pumped just by that casting announcement, because you've got Star Wars and Game of Thrones coming together with some new guys. Super pumped. I am very much looking forward to a trailer to kind of see what they're going to do with this. DC has a very good track record for the most part when it comes to their TV shows and their animated stuff. Their films, not so much.
Yeah, I gotta say that is my favorite for DC. The movies, I watch them, but the TV shows, like the CW ones, that's what I look forward to.
Oh yeah, I mean, I started that with Arrow, and I loved Arrow. I haven't watched the last couple of seasons because I've just been busy. But Arrow, Flash, their Black Adam movie that's coming out soon with The Rock. Black Lightning, I haven't seen, but it is on my list. Loved Legends of Tomorrow when it started.
The most recent season of Legends of Tomorrow has been my favorite.
Okay, I stopped watching it when Arthur Darvill left, which was literally the reason why I started watching it was for him.
Yeah, same.
Okay, I'm not alone in this. See?
Some good Rory love. No, it got even better. It got more campy and fun. And they just have like little one-off adventures.
Sounds awesome.
Like sometimes with the superhero shows, you get drawn into an arc that takes the entire season, and you feel like, when is this going to be done? The Legends of Tomorrow, it's much more like these tiny little episodes.
Okay,
it's
cool.
It's good times.
All right. So we are going to get into WandaVision. So there have been 5 episodes as of currently. I'll read a little synopsis and then we'll get into breaking down each episode.
Yes.
So with episode 1, it is entitled Filmed Before a Live Studio Audience, which this one was a recreation of the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Yeah.
So, newlywed couple Wanda and Vision move into the town of Westview in the 1950s. Despite Vision being an android and Wanda having telekinesis and reality warping abilities, they attempt to blend in. On one day, they notice a heart drawn around their calendar, but neither can remember what the occasion is while Vision goes to his job at Computational Services Incorporated. Wanda decides that the heart represents their anniversary, and their neighbor Agnes introduces herself and helps her prepare to celebrate that night. Vision amazes his coworkers with his speed, but is unsure what his company actually does. He's reminded that he and Wanda are hosting his boss, Mr. Hart, and his wife for dinner that night, which is what the heart represents.
Yeah.
Wanda and Vision struggle to hide their abilities while making a last-minute dinner for the Harts. While interrogating Wanda and Vision, Mr. Hart chokes on his food, and Vision uses his ability to save him. All of this takes place in the fictional sitcom WandaVision, which someone is watching on a television. A little bit of foreshadowing there at the end.
Yeah.
And they do have so they have little mini commercials, which I love in these. And this one is the Toaster Mate 2000 from Stark Industries.
It's also our first pop of color because everything that we're seeing is in black and white, like a 50s TV show would be.
Yep. Yeah. So this first episode is kind of interesting. It is full on campy 50s sitcom.
Absolutely.
Which I love so much.
Yeah.
There has just been so many different little knickknacks and references. I loved all of the, floating dishes and the fact that at one point Wanda goes in and tries to cook a chicken and ends up going too far and then goes all the way back to eggs. So good.
It gave like some Bewitched vibes.
Yes.
Like I Dream of Jeannie, all of that with her magic going kind of unpredictable.
Yeah.
And so it was very much like if WandaVision had been a sitcom in the 50s, what it would have been like silly antics. And I heard a lot of mixed reactions because there are people who came straight from Avengers Endgame into this, and they're like, I don't want this. But if you stick with the show for a couple of episodes, you see why it was this. Yeah. And to me, that just makes me love it even more.
Well, it's interesting. So there's been some theories of whether or not this is Wanda controlling this. This series is heavily based on the House of M comics. Also, the I believe it's the Scarlet Witch comic when Wanda and Vision have a baby. So you get, a lot of these kind of misdirection, miscommunication type moments. The heart, for example, there's a great line when Wanda says, you can make a pamphlet. Oh gosh, how's that go? You can make a pamphlet through the air, and I. Oh my.
No, it's Vision can move faster than the speed of light, and
I can make a pamphlet through the air.
Who needs to abbreviate?
Yeah, that's the one. It's a great moment, and there's all these little you could kind of almost see the practical effects of her floating stuff throughout the kitchen, and all of these weird little, almost misses and stuff like that, and even the people that they cast.
Oh, so good,
right? I mean, there was, the what's her name that plays Mrs. Hart, from that '70s show.
Debbie Jo Reynolds, I think her name is.
Yeah, I'm pulling up.
I could be pulling that out of thin air, but Deborah Jo Rupp.
Yeah, you were close. You were close.
I was so close.
Yeah, all these little moments where you had just kind of little fun references from different shows and different things. You know, even down to the set design where they wore very specific clothes to show up on black and white was
Yeah.
just so good and so well done.
Yeah, it like the entire set was so perfectly what you would expect a house from the 50s to look like.
Yeah.
And it was so perfectly sitcom-esque,
Yeah.
you know? Like Marvel is big budget, it's action, it's excitement, it's intrigue and mystery all wrapped up into one. And then this was just some lighthearted 50s silly, like she does a pratfall into Mr. Hart's arms.
Yeah.
And everybody's got the over the top acting, like Catherine Hahn.
Oh my gosh, that was so good.
Big gas. Like, you gotta love that somebody can just go so over the top perfect into like 50s era. But as we see as we go through the episodes, they're doing this for different time frames. It's so amazing.
Yeah, you know, and it's funny. So in each of the episodes or each of the sitcoms has a intro written by Robert and Kristen Lopez from Frozen, Coco, etc. You know, they're kind of the new Disney composing team when it comes to most stuff, which is so good. I mean, I enjoyed most of them of the 5 episodes that we've seen, except for the second one, the Bewitched one. It's okay.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean it's okay. But yeah, this episode was great, and you know, I know a lot of people were like, I don't understand why they're doing this. It's like, no, you have to watch old school sitcoms to understand how perfectly recreated this is.
Yeah.
It is so well done. And there's a couple little interesting kind of Easter eggs and stuff, like when they end, it's in a hex, which they haven't really said yet, but a lot of people think it's pointing towards AIM. And that kind of leads to the idea of, okay, is this really Wanda controlling this? Is it somebody controlling her to control this?
Wanda's magic is also called hex magic.
This is true in the comics.
So yeah, so there's a lot where you don't know where you are, where you're going. You're dropped into this sitcom house.
Yeah.
And it's all black and white, and you're like, well, that's Wanda and Vision, and they've obviously got their powers because they're using them.
Yep.
But we don't know why they're there. They just seem to accept that they're there, and then they're like, oh, you know, we're not married. Let's get married. And then suddenly they have rings.
Yeah.
And so you don't know like what time frame we're in. When we were just watching the trailer before the first episode dropped, I thought we were going to be like in Wanda's mind before any of the events of the movies even unfolded.
Yeah.
Like, I had a suspicion that it was the Mind Stone creating her powers and this was all in her head. Like, who knows? We could have been anywhere. Yeah.
Well, you know, and it is interesting. I'm not entirely sure where the timeline is as far as how soon after Endgame this is. Is it before Endgame, etc.? And
well, the 5th episode does give us that
a little
answer.
Bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll get there in a sec.
We're at least narrowed down.
Yeah. So at the end of the first episode, we see someone writing in a notebook, watching it on an old school TV, which I had my theories about going into the 4th episode, and I'm so glad I was right. I was convinced that it was Darcy, and I was right. And one of the things that I loved about this is that they bring back the kind of minor MCU characters.
Yeah.
In a couple of different ways, which is a lot of fun. So, moving on to episode 2, which I guess I should have done a spoiler warning. I'll have to do that for the video.
Oh, well, you can when you edit this, put a big giant spoilers at the beginning. If we're talking about WandaVision, of course, there's going to be spoilers. That's what people are here for.
Exactly.
If you haven't watched it yet, just pause. Go watch the episodes. We haven't really spoiled what has happened.
True.
So watch all 5 real quick and then come back to us. and then watch
Ding, ding,
them
ding.
again, because now you'll catch all those little things. You'll be like, oh, that's what they were talking about.
Yeah, and this series really needs to be watched multiple times per episode.
Yeah.
I think I've watched the entire series through probably 15 times in the last 5 or 6 weeks.
You've got me on that. I've watched every episode at least twice, because I watched it by myself and then I watched it with my husband. And the most recent episode I've watched like 1.5 times.
You know, it's interesting because they're relatively short. They're really easy to watch kind of back to back to back. And so I will often like put it on like right when I get home while I'm kind of winding down for a few minutes and then go to bed. So it makes it really easy to rewatch. And even though they're really short, I never feel like I'm gypped on story. There's so much that they put into it.
And it's very much like an old school sitcom where the entire story is wrapped up within that time frame. And yes, you've got like the continuing saga of why is she there, what's going on. So you've got that little bitty tease at the end that's like, oh, I gotta watch the next one.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love that, because in a movie, like, you could have done WandaVision in a movie. There's nothing saying you couldn't have. It wouldn't have been nearly as exciting or nearly as successful, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's that little bit of everything is normal. It's silly, it's fun, but it's normal. Oh wait, something's wrong. Something's dangerous.
Yeah.
Right at the end.
Yeah.
Because if we're talking first episode into second episode, there was really nothing dangerous until the end of the first episode.
Yeah.
When Mr. Hart was choking and Mrs. Hart was just starting to kind of unwind, shouting, "Stop it!" You didn't.
It's interesting. So I didn't catch this till about the third time I rewatched it, but it's like she's in a loop.
Yeah.
And she's kind of bucking a little bit against whatever is controlling her. And it was almost like she was telling Wanda to stop it. Like, that she was the one controlling this, which I'm not entirely sure was the case, but I think she believed that that was the case.
Yeah. Because the first couple of times she says, "Stop it," it's like she's laughing and trying to say it to Mr. Hart like he was joking. And then it gets very dark and very serious, and there's a music switch. And so you feel like you kind of chill a little bit, and you're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Like, I thought everything was lighthearted and fun, and it seems scary all of a sudden. And then the episode's all lighthearted again and over, and then you've got just those couple of seconds where you see someone's watching, and you're like, who's watching? What's happening? Like, is this a TV show? I thought I was just watching a TV show, but now it's a TV show.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
Well, you know, and it's fun. So they end each episode, or at least of the sitcom, with them sitting down in front of the TV, and that is, okay, fade to black, we're going to, you know, stop there. That's how everything resets in this world.
Yeah.
And so it becomes kind of, okay, this is where our set piece ends, and then we're going to move on to the next episode. So, episode 2 is entitled Don't Touch That Dial, which I just love. I love all these like weird little TV references, and I love the like when you hit the end credit sequence, you know, it's the "Please stand by," and it changes with each era, and it updates as they've been updated. It just makes me happy.
Yep.
As a film nerd, it makes me happy. So, for Do Not Touch That Dial. In the 60s, Vision and Wanda try to fit in by performing at the community talent show fundraiser for the children. As a magician and his beautiful assistant, Vision gets drunk when Gum gums up his inner machinery, and Wanda has to use her magic to convince everyone that their real stage magic is actually fake. So this one has a couple of like weird little interesting things that happen. So they use "for the children" a lot. Like, for the children. And, you know, they have that kind of typical socialite PTA meeting of all the moms, you know, setting up this big talent show event. And yet, you never see any kids.
Good point.
There's all these kids. Like, there's this lovely playground and stuff. You never see any kids playing, and it's always like the moms are together, the dads are together, and that's it. Like there's no interaction between the two groups. And we start off the episode with a bewitched type moment where you have the like branch rattling outside the window, and it's like, oh, who is it? You know, and Wanda's turning out the light on and off, and it just cracks me up. It's so straight out of Bewitched. And then you've got
well, and then she brings the beds together, and then this is the first time we have a conjoined bed, which used to be salacious on TV.
Well, yeah. Like,
I mean, characters were pregnant. How do you think they got pregnant? They didn't sleep in single beds. Come on.
And like, you know, they didn't sleep in separate rooms, and
we're not Victorian England here.
Yeah. It's such a British thing, and it cracks me up every time I watch something like The Crown and they have separate bedrooms, and I'm like, why?
Yeah. Like
anyway, getting slightly off topic.
It's weird.
It is what it is. So they have Vision goes to the kind of neighborhood watch type thing after they finish their magic act.
I don't know if you grasped this, but that was Tony Stark's original plan for Vision when he created him, was that he be a shield for the world, that he would protect the world.
Gotcha.
And so the first thing that Vision does when he's really like confronted with something dangerous is he's like, I must protect. I'm going to go join the community watch, and what's the police presence here? Take care of everybody.
Yeah, which I find really interesting on a number of levels. Because you have him kind of, you know, trying to fit in with the guys and making jokes, and you know, he makes that one joke about one of the guys being a communist, and it's like, you know, in that time era, you're not that far from the McCarthy trials.
Yeah.
And the Red Scare.
I don't think everybody would be joking and laughing at that.
No. You know, so, and then you have so you've got that moment, and then you've got Wanda. Oh, that's right. Wanda finds the colorized helicopter.
Yes. So this is our first clue to the outside world, because it's got a logo on that. And the logo is for SWORD.
Yes.
So this took a little bit of research on my part. It's going to become much more obvious in later episodes. But SWORD is in the comics, it's actually like the counterpart to S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
So S.H.I.E.L.D. is Strategic Homeland, blah, 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 Defense and Logistics, something like that.
Yeah. It's a lot.
But it's like dealing with threats on Earth. So SWORD is the aerospace counterpart to that. It's supposed to deal with like threats throughout the galaxy, through the universe. And it's been reworked a little bit for this series. Yeah. But so when I first saw the logo and figured out, okay, that's what SWORD is, that put me spinning into, are they trying to rescue Wanda? Like this toy has to have some kind of significance because it's the only pop of color that we have.
Yeah, so and this will become kind of apparent later on, but it is a drone that gets changed to meet the era that it is in. And there is one significant change that they did with SWORD, and they changed it to sentient weapons, which it was not in the comics. And that'll become apparent later on, especially with some of the stuff that happens with Vision. But it was founded by Maria Rambeau, who, if you guys have seen Captain Marvel, you will know who that is.
By her mom, right?
Yeah. I want to say it's Maria, because this is Monica.
Oh, yeah, Maria's the mother of Monica.
Yes.
I switched their names.
I was like, please don't switch them in my head. Please don't switch them.
So after the events of the Captain Marvel movie, which took place in the 80s, obviously Mama Rambeau has been going to, like, she knows that there are threats out there in the universe, and she's going to try to help protect the Earth.
Yeah.
And started this agency up, is essentially what we're assuming.
Yeah, and that'll become apparent in episode 4. They kind of dive more into the sword side of things. So Vision's at his neighborhood watch thing. Wanda goes to the planning committee meeting, and we get our first anomaly, which is someone talking to Wanda through the radio. And this is later identified to be Jimmy Woo from the Ant-Man series.
Yes.
Who
learned how to do close-up magic.
I know. It's just so good.
He worked so hard on it.
So good. There is like one little moment in episode 4 that I just love that they brought it in.
Just like all of those tiny little details where they thought about it from all of the movies where they're pulling these random characters. And they're like, yeah, he liked the close-up magic from Ant-Man. Yeah, he learned how to do it himself. Of course he would, because he'd be a human being.
Right.
And yeah, well, I love that. I love the thought that goes into that.
Well, and also, like, they know that we break all of this down and that we look for every little Easter egg possible, so they put them in on purpose. And it just makes me happy as a Marvel fan that I'm just like, thank you. Thank you.
It's made for the fans.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not trying to win an Oscar with this. They're doing this because it's like they're as much fans of these franchises as we are.
Yeah.
You know, like the main directors and producers that are in charge are just as big of nerds as we are, and I love it.
Oh yeah, 100%. Which is really awesome. So we get this thing where he's saying, Wanda, do you read me? Trying to communicate with her, trying to kind of figure out what's going on.
You, Wanda?
And we get our first anomaly within the broadcast, which is this blip. And there's kind of 2 theories about blips. The little ones, I think, are Wanda controlling the world a little bit. So when she blips and suddenly Dottie has a cut, and you see her actually bleeding, and it is actual red blood, which I think will be significant later on. And then we have one later in the episode that is, I don't think, Wanda.
I have the opposite feeling. I think that it absolutely is. I think it's just the technology that she has.
Maybe.
That maybe we're seeing things from her perspective, or we're seeing things from the outside perspective. Maybe. And the editing looks different from either side. So that's my theory.
That very well may be. I will
say, though, you mentioned the red blood.
Yeah.
This is the 3rd time that we've seen color.
Yeah.
There was a red light in the first episode.
Yep.
There was a red helicopter, and now red blood.
Yeah.
Scarlet Witch. Red is the color.
Of the trailers we've seen, they do bring out the costume. So...
They do. Oh, they do. I can't wait for that. That hasn't happened yet.
That's going to be next episode. That is the Halloween episode, which I'm super pumped about. So then we get into the talent show. And at this point, because Vision is an idiot and he eats gum and then swallows it.
Yeah, he's gummed up.
Yeah, it screws up his... And I love that they have this like old school little cartoon where it's just like around the clock. It's so good.
Yeah, like her x-ray of him becomes like a very 1960s cartoon.
Yes, it's so good. So they then start to do the magic show, and things kind of get a little out of whack. And Wanda has to use actual magic. Like he starts floating, and he so Wanda has to come up with like a little rig to where
it makes it look like he was attached to a pulley the whole time.
Yeah, or when he lifts up the piano and she turns it into cardboard, or have this like card trick where he goes to the entire deck because he doesn't do it correctly. So funny.
I love that the audience was all like gasping, like when he would do something because he's using his actual powers. He puts a hat through his stomach. They're all like, oh, yeah. And then she's like, wiggles her finger and makes it like some kind of blatant trick.
Yeah. And
then they're like, oh, but they were. It felt like they were a sitcom
Audience. Yeah.
that was just gasping when the gasp light turned on, you know? Like, it felt very like they were scripted and forced.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love they do the cabinet, and he forgets to have Wanda step into the cabinet and then disappear. So
Yeah.
he just
She's like,
does the
"Hi."
trick, and she's like, and grabs Geraldine from the back and
Yeah.
sticks her in there. She's like, how did I was backstage. How did I end up in here?
Mm-hmm.
So good. So then we head back to the house where after they win first prize, and they have this very little cute moment when they're dancing after she pulls the gum out.
Mm-hmm.
And they hear a noise outside, which is very interesting, and it's a guy coming out of the sewers in a beekeeping uniform.
Yeah. With bees floating around, being very creepy.
Yeah, very, very creepy, with the sword logo on the back.
Mm-hmm.
And we get this interesting moment because at this point, I believe, so I'm like scrolling through the episode.
Wanda and Vision step outside to see what this noise is.
Yes.
She's standing in front of Vision.
Yeah.
And she just is like, no.
Yeah. Well, and also she is very pregnant.
Oh, yeah, suddenly pregnant.
Suddenly pregnant.
Well, we skipped over it just slightly right before the noise.
Yeah.
They're talking and they're like, ha ha ha, for the children, because that was the catchphrase of this episode. And then she says, well, I think the children want popcorn. And then she stands up and we're like, oh, now she's pregnant.
Yeah, she's like 3 or 4 months pregnant.
Yeah.
Suddenly.
So all of a sudden she's pregnant.
Yeah.
And Vision is a robot, you know.
Yeah. And this is one of those, like, it becomes very apparent that she's kind of willing this into existence. And they do have history in the comics. Tommy and Billy, as they are known in the comics, or better known as Wiccan and... Oh my gosh.
I always forget the other one's name.
Right? Hold on.
I know that he's like something speedy because it's...
Yeah, because he has Pietro's powers.
Mm-hmm.
Wiccan and Speed. Wiccan and Speed.
Oh, just Speed. That's why, because he's speedy fast, and I'm like, I never.
Yeah, he's so one takes after Wanda, the other one takes after Pietro.
But nobody takes after Vision because, you know, they came out of Wanda's mind, not out of it.
Exactly. I mean, she's basically, creating another set of
biology.
So much fun. So we get to the beekeeper. Wanda says no, and we hit rewind, basically, in a very obvious kind of way. And we go back to is this really happening? And Vision says yes.
And so this time around, they have a tender moment and then go about the rest of the episode. They don't hear a noise outside anymore.
Nope.
They don't see anybody coming out in a beekeeping costume.
Yes. And at that moment is when everything shifts to color and we take the shift into the 1970s and into the Brady Bunch episode.
I love that.
It's so good. They
had like the staircase perfect. Like, at the same time, this episode of the 60s, I knew that they were switching to the 60s because then we started saying like Peachy Keen and she wore pants and her hair was a little different, but it wasn't like a hard change.
No.
But then you're sitting there like watching them in the house and you're like, something's different. If you go back and watch the first episode again, it was a completely different set.
Oh, yeah.
Like they took the house from the 50s to the 60s.
Yeah.
And you don't really notice it until this episode. It becomes color, and then it changes to a very 70s Brady Bunch house.
Yep.
And that's when you realize that everything is being redesigned, not just them. It's like the entire world is changing into the 70s.
Yeah, exactly. And you get the very kind of Bewitched, the end with the sparklies, and then you hear the Wanda, who's doing this to you, Wanda, at the end.
Yeah.
Which is just so good.
So good.
So, episode 3 is now in color. which, as
Mhm.
we've said, this is the Brady Bunch episode.
And again, these titles are just fitting like TV tropes so well
Oh yeah,
because these are things that we've heard
100%.
for decades.
So
Like
this is
it's great.
the last episode where it is just straight sitcom.
Mhm.
Uh, Going forward, it'll be either from Sword's perspective or a mix,
Yeah.
which is very, very good. So, for episode 3, Wanda becomes 9 months pregnant in the course of 24 hours. Wouldn't
Mhm.
every woman love this? Like, this would be the way to be pregnant.
Gotta say, like for efficiency's sake, nothing beats it.
It's just beautiful.
I think I would have preferred the time to prepare, but I guess if you have magic fingers.
Yeah. While she and Vision tried to hide her condition from their Westview neighbors and friends,
Mhm.
Geraldine, Agnes, and Herb reveal that they know more than they're letting on, while Geraldine finds herself going on an unexpected trip.
That's one way of putting it.
That's one way of putting it, yes. I love that the intro to this is a lot of the scenes that we saw in the trailer.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, a lot of the kind of B-roll stuff of like them dancing and stuff like that is stuff that we saw in the trailers, which is great because it didn't really spoil anything, which is nice. Excuse me. So, we get into the Brady Bunch. It opens with the doctor, and he's, checking her
We
out.
like to explain it in fruit to Little Women.
Oh,
And
God.
she's just really crying, like, I am a modern woman, you
so,
tool.
so condescending. But I get it because that was the time.
Yeah.
And it
It was
was,
very 70s.
how did he put it? It was like peach and papaya and pineapples and honeydews and all this stuff.
Yeah.
It was weird fruit. But we get our first dad joke from Vision, and it's, I'm so how does he say it? Hold on, let me find it real quick.
Are you saying the proud papaya?
Yes, I can't wait to be a proud papaya.
Yeah. Well, at that time, like for the first couple of minutes of that episode, she's like 4 or 5 months pregnant.
Yeah. And then she's like
And
6.
as she gets up and like walks around the corner, then suddenly she's like 7 months pregnant, the size of a papaya. And that's when she accidentally knocks a papaya off the table and he makes a proud papaya joke. So she's
so
like,
cheesy.
she is rapidly advancing through this pregnancy as we watch.
Yeah.
Like, completely unfolding on screen.
Yes, absolutely.
Which honestly is a lot like, sitcoms, because you go from somebody being pregnant and then like 2 weeks later they're giving birth because nobody wants to sit through that. And then the kid is like 3 months for a minute, and then the next week they're a 7-year-old, and then the next week they're a teenager having kids of their own. Like, well, that's more soap operas, but still, it happens a lot. It's a TV trope for a reason.
Yeah, and it works. In a show where they don't have a lot of time, they needed to compress as much as they could.
Yeah, and it really reinforces that this can't be right. Something is wrong in this world, and we don't know what yet.
Yeah. Well, and also, it's at the end of this episode where things really take off.
Yeah.
So that's good. And we start to see some suspicious things. Like when Vision is walking the doctor out, Herb is cutting the bush, but he misses the bush and just keeps cutting into the brick wall, kind of implying that he's not really in control of what he's doing.
Yeah, and he doesn't see that there's anything wrong. Even after Vision draws his attention to it, he's like, "Oh, thanks, buddy," but he still keeps continuing to cut down.
Yeah. So there's a couple of people who we start to suspect maybe aren't controlled by the simulation. Agnes is one of them. Geraldine is one of them. So it'll be interesting to kind of see going forward who else pops up. So we get into So we have the doctor, and then we get into Vision and Wanda prepping the nursery, and them fighting about names.
Yeah.
And Vision tried to do, he wants Billy, she wants Tommy, which is just adorable.
It is.
Although, why they're fighting about boys' names and then they paint the nursery purple, I'm not quite sure.
It's a nice, pretty color. Like,
it
there's
is,
a cute
but
baby
I would think it more for
wall.
a girl than a boy.
Yeah. Well, at the same time, she had the hiccup when she's like saying she has a really fluttery feeling inside, and then the butterflies turn to life and go fluttering away, and she's like, "Oh, did I do that?" It really feels like she's losing control of what's happening, losing control of her own magic. Even she doesn't realize what she's doing.
I actually have a theory about that. I actually think it's Billy, the one Wiccan. The one that has her powers. I actually think he's the one doing it, not her.
Yeah.
Which is why it kind of is so weirdly popping up.
That is clever.
All right.
And as he gets closer to being born, he starts flexing his little Wiccan powers.
Yeah. And maybe the speed element is speed.
Which he is the first baby to be born.
Yes.
He's a little fast, buddy.
I mean, he just can't wait to get out there. And then we get Vision trying to figure out like what the algorithm is that she will be born by. And it's like Friday afternoon. It's like, nope, in like 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yep. So of course he speeds away himself to go get the doctor.
Yep. Well, we have this great little moment where she takes out the entire block of power, and there's this great moment with one of the neighbors where his wife comes in and she asks him a question about something, and the power goes out, and he's like, "Oh, thank God."
Yeah.
So good.
Mm-hmm. Oh, speaking of power going off, I think it was pretty close to this point that had the commercial. We didn't mention the commercial from the second episode.
Oh, that's right.
That was the Baron Strucker watch.
Yeah, the Strucker.
Baron Strucker was the Hydra scientist who watched Quicksilver and Wanda get their powers in the first place.
Yep, and this one is
all about a mom who needs a break.
With Hydra soap.
Yeah. And obviously Hydra, it's got like the logo and everything.
Yeah.
And Hydra's gonna take all your troubles away. Wanda had trouble with her loyalties in the beginning.
True. This is true. I mean,
he played both sides of the coin.
Yep. And Strucker was a Hydra offshoot.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got that going on, and then we get into Wanda has her water break via a rain shower.
Yep. As normal mothers do. I'm just gonna say.
God bless her.
I heard it's very common for it to start raining inside the house when your water breaks.
Well, and then, I love that she just opens the door and then has the wind blow, and that's and then 3 seconds later, everything's dry. She has perfect hair again. And, Vision goes running off for the doctor, and Geraldine shows up to get a bucket of all things, which is a little weird.
She needs a bucket.
I mean, hey.
Perfect. Well, that's the first time that you really have... Well, no, I guess Agnes was coming by with a pineapple earlier a couple episodes ago. But the neighbors just dropped by at exactly the right time to intervene in the story.
Yep.
Very sitcom.
Very sitcom. And it's funny. And at one, as she's, having contractions, the stork turns to real life, which is hilarious. And so when Geraldine pops by, she decides to put on a coat. Why she thought that would hide her pregnancy? God, I don't know.
Oh no, that's another sitcom thing. Like when actresses were pregnant in real life, they would have props like
the big purses
or a big purse or a big coat. And so it's playing into the stereotypes of you could tell they were pregnant.
Yeah.
But they would still do it. Yeah.
Well, and I love Geraldine's outfit here. From the fish pants
I love the fish pants. Yeah.
The fish pants, the like half vest thing, and she's got a little sword necklace.
Yeah.
So that's fun. And we get different moments where things are popping, or they're freaking out. So she changes coats like 3 times. It's solid stuff. And at one point, she decides to tell her the story about how she, got this new job, for coming up with this brilliant slogan, about gravity O's, which will play a part later on.
A very 60s serial title. Like, of course they'd be called Gravity O's.
Right?
Or 70s. I keep forgetting. We're in the 70s
We're in the 70s now. Very colorful. The bell bottoms. So then Wanda throws stuff at the stork to make it go away, and Vision comes back with the doctor, but not before Geraldine delivers Tommy?
Tommy's first.
Tommy's first.
He's the fast one.
And then we get this really great moment where everything is freaking out in the house as she's giving birth. The vacuum cleaner is exploding, the pictures are spinning on the walls. Like, it's a lot. She gives birth to Tommy, and then everything dies down, and Vision comes back, and she's like, do you want to meet your son as yourself?
Yeah.
Which is just so awesome.
It's very sweet. But I also like that Geraldine specifically saw all the things going weird and was like, I'm sure there's a logical reason for this.
Yeah.
Let's just keep going.
Right? And then we get Billy born, and that's interesting. So we get that guy, and then we have the 20 fingers. 20
Did you notice
toes.
that the doctor didn't actually deliver either baby?
Nope, he was just kind of there.
Yeah, he got dragged all the way there to do nothing. But I thought it was sweet that Vision was the one who wanted to name the child Billy after William Shakespeare. And he's the one that, holding Tommy for the first time, called him Tommy.
Yeah.
And then Wanda wanted Tommy, and she's the one who named Billy.
Yeah.
So they kind of did that for each other. It was very sweet.
Yeah. It is great. Because, Vision walks the doctors out, and he says something interesting. He's like, I hope you can get back to your vacation. He's like, oh, I don't think we'll leave after all. Small towns are so hard to escape.
Yes.
Which, again, that sense of
one
foreboding.
of the first times where Vision is noticing that there's really something weird happening.
Yes. And we get all these hints that there isn't something quite right in this town. And we really get some breaks when Geraldine mentions Ultron, because they started talking about Pietro. And suddenly...
And that's also the first time Wanda's accent slips back in. Because she's been very Americanized all this time.
Yes. And, Herb and Agnes are talking, and they're telling Vision, Geraldine's new to town. She doesn't have a home. She doesn't have a husband.
Yeah.
Cluing him into something isn't right with her, let alone the town.
Yeah.
And he comes back in, and she has disappeared. She had to rush home. And we get to the end of the episode with them. So Vision comes back in, and we get taken to the edge of town, where we see the Westview sign, and we see Geraldine get thrown out of a barrier.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, something really isn't right in this town.
Yeah. And something has gone wrong in a big way.
Oh, yeah. And
he's still wearing the cool fish pants and the vest.
Solid
all 70s funky.
And also, this is the first time. So as we switch from Wanda and Vision to the Westview side, we also get the aspect ratio change. Which they use it very ominously.
Yes.
Because it goes from the kind of old school square to the current 16:9. Which is an interesting way that they not only use it to show foreboding, but also to delineate time zones and timelines.
Yeah. It feels like we've gone out of the sitcom and into the real world.
Exactly. And so as she gets tossed out this telekinetic barrier, basically, and she is covered in red, so we know Wanda threw her. Which will become very apparent next episode as to why.
Very apparent.
And then we see a bunch of SUVs pop up. So that's fun. So we get,
and they're all like modern, tactical kind of SUVs.
Yep. Yeah, so much fun. All right, so episode 4 is we interrupt this program. Now this
and it starts by interrupting this program.
Yeah. So this one is fun because this is everything from Sword's perspective. So the first 3 episodes from Sword's perspective.
We start getting answers and figuring out
we start getting answers, and we actually, interestingly, start from the blip in Endgame. So after people recover from the blip, Monica Rambeau is sent to investigate the disappearance of a Witsec person in a small town that no one remembers. Monica herself disappears, and Jimmy Woo and Darcy Lewis are called in to help investigate.
So for context at this point, because we're kind of just dropped back into this, the story and real people that we've seen before. So Monica is the little girl, the daughter of Captain Marvel's best friend from the Captain Marvel franchise.
Yes.
Jimmy Woo is an FBI agent from the Ant-Man franchise. He's the one who makes sure that Scott stays under house arrest.
Yep.
And Darcy Lewis is the best friend of Natalie Portman's Jane character from Thor.
Yes.
So we're grabbing people from different franchises throughout MCU and putting them together in a very realistic way of how these characters would interact.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's kind of interesting. So we get, the episode opens with Monica being unblipped in honestly a much better way than Endgame even did it, which is saying something for visual effects.
Really? Oh, so good.
I mean, it was beautiful. And we find her freaking out in hospital because when she blipped,
as you would do,
she was asleep and her mom had just had surgery. And we find out it's been 5 years later. Her mom died 2 years ago. 2 years ago? 3 years ago?
Yeah.
One of those times. She died several years ago.
Mom died 3 years ago, which was 2 years after Monica disappeared.
Yes, there we go. And we find out that she works for SWORD in the astronaut program, and that she's actually the first to report back to SWORD after everything happened. It was like 3 weeks later. And the guy who is currently taking over is Tyler Hayward, who is the interim director of SWORD. And we find out that they have shifted from extraterrestrial stuff to more IA, nanotech, stuff like that. So they're kind of trying to take over for Stark and for Pymtech, basically.
Yeah. So it's very apparent from their conversation that they had an astronaut program. It was probably having to do with maybe a space station. You kind of get the feeling of that. And he alludes to things that make you think something bad happened during the blip that made them want to not risk people's lives. So they're focusing on nanotech, artificial intelligence, and they're trying to focus on things that they can control, observe, use, but that they're not creating any of those technologies themselves.
Yeah. So, and then, of course, he tells her that she's grounded, per her mother's protocols, which, what a way to come back. And,
your mom grounded you 3 years after she died.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like,
awkward.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we get, and then she heads off to Westview to supervise the drone, basically. And she gets there, meets Jimmy, who, tells her that he's been looking for a witness, and he's called up a bunch of people, and none of them have ever heard of him.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And they talk to the sheriff, and the sheriff says Westview doesn't exist.
They're standing in front of the Westview sign.
Yeah, but it doesn't
and
exist.
The sheriff doesn't remember it existing.
And he's from Eastview.
Yeah.
So you get the idea that this town that's been created is an opposite of what it actually should be. So they send a drone in. The drone disappears, which we then find out is the helicopter from episode 2. It has been repurposed to fit the time and era that they're in.
Exactly. So it looks like it makes sense in that world.
Yes.
The toy helicopter that looks like it would have been in the 60s.
Yeah, exactly.
Except that it's in color.
Exactly. And so when it disappears, she decides to go up to the barrier and get sucked in.
Yeah. So she's looking into it and gets very close and she doesn't intend to get sucked in, but as she reaches towards it, it like grabs her up and she disappears too. So now everybody's freaking out because they didn't know that would happen.
Yeah, exactly. So they set up a containment field. They bring in a bunch of people, one of which being Darcy Lewis, who is now Dr. Lewis. She has completed her PhD.
One of my favorite side characters.
Oh, yeah.
I love that actress. I love her character.
No, I will say they did tone down the sass a lot, which I kind of missed. I wanted her to be a little more sassy.
Well, she's been a little on the sassy side. Like she has little snippets. It's not as overt.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's enough that I'm still really enjoying.
Yeah, and so she gets pulled into the headquarters where they have all her RF equipment set up, and she asks, "What have they been getting on the drones?" And the guy says it's highly classified. She's like, "You can't see anything."
Yeah.
And
she knows exactly what's going on.
Exactly.
As she rolls up.
And this is SWORD, Army, Air Force Special Investigations, FBI, CID, Research Lab, Space Command. Like, it is everybody.
Every alphabet you could think of.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, except for maybe the CIA.
No Environmental Protection Agency, maybe. Who knows?
Maybe. So she pulls up her equipment, and she's getting a lot of CMBR, which is cosmic micro background radiation, which is
the same radiation that created the Fantastic Four.
Yes.
So we are opening the door for Fantastic Four. To
100%. And this is basically stuff that's been around forever, Big Bang, all that fun stuff.
And the Big Bang is when the Infinity Stones were created.
Yep.
So it's the same like radiation energy that they give off too.
Yeah. So you've got all of that, and then you've got a broadcast frequency that she found intertwined with it, and that was how they were able to see the sitcoms. And we start with the Dick Van Dyke one, the first one, and they go into each of the episodes going forward, and then the next thing we see is a guy in a hazmat suit getting lowered into the sewers, which becomes beekeeping guy.
Exactly.
And it's interesting, once he gets to the line where the barrier is, his tether turns into an old school plastic jump rope.
I loved that.
I love it so much.
The details, everything got changed. So his hazmat suit became the beekeeper suit.
Yep.
Because you wouldn't have a hazmat suit in the 60s in a sitcom. So everything just like instantly becomes whatever would look normal in that world.
Yes, exactly. So they start identifying characters within the shows, and they have IDs for everyone except for Agnes, who they never mention. It's like they don't know she exists.
She's up there, but they don't have an ID for her yet.
It's very weird.
outside of the episode, a lot of the names that they used are writers and producers on the show. So
Interesting.
when they say somebody's name is whatever the case might be, that's an actual real person that's like writing on the show, or a second producer or something like that, which I thought was a fun little Easter egg.
It's so many things that they do. I'm just like, thank you for being you.
It's like layers on layers.
Yeah, exactly. And they have like all of these questions. They have all the stuff that they failed to do. And they have all these questions like, why the hexagons? Why sitcoms? Is this still in the same time and space? Is Vision alive? All of these things.
It's all the same questions we're asking.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're the questions they're asking. I love it.
It's so good. And everyone's like, why sitcoms? I'm like, because it's cool.
Because sitcoms are awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the next thing you see is Darcy and Jimmy trying to talk to Wanda through the radio. So, and that's when we kind of get to see that they're recording everything, and that's where we get to see the first blips, because we see them on their footage, her hearing him, and then it blipping to Dottie has a cut on her hand, and the joke about linens and how to get a blood-stained out of linen.
Yeah, so that's how we can also see that the perspective is different. We were seeing things from inside the show before, so we know those couple of seconds of weird Jimmy speaking over the radio, Wanda not understanding what was happening. We saw all of that confusion. You don't see it now.
Yeah.
The second time they run through it, we see it from the outside perspective of the show kind of skips.
Yeah.
And it's not a cut like, it's not seamless.
Yeah.
You're meant to see that something changed.
Yeah.
And so while they're watching it, you can tell that it's been edited. You don't know by who.
Yeah.
But you can tell that there's editing happening.
So, and then the next thing we see is, of course, Beekeeper guy coming out. And the thing that's interesting is we get a wider shot this time of them. And it's so adorable because Vision has his hand on her stomach. And it's just like, oh, so cute.
So adorable.
And we get the blip, the rewind. Because this is a bigger rewind, and he is in color this time, which is interesting. So we see everything in color from that shot, and then it goes to black and white once she says no. And then we rewind, and we don't see him again.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And then we go immediately to episode 3, and then going, okay, water's broken.
So they're tracking the progress of the show. They're taking notes. Darcy is getting heavily invested in the characters,
which I find hilarious.
Yeah, she's a big fan. But they notice the things that we've been talking about. That the decades are changing. Yep. They notice the progression with the characters. And so they're talking about, okay, well, now she's pregnant. Now she's had the kids. Now it's the 70s. They can see all the same stuff that we've noticed.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, again, it's just, it's so meta. I love it.
Yeah. And we see them freak out because we see a blip and then the show ends. And we see Wanda, get, like, real serious, and then it cuts to them on the couch with the babies, and they're like, whoa, what happened?
Yep.
And that's when we get the aspect ratio change again. And we see Wanda drop the facade entirely and go, no, you are not my friend. You are not my neighbor. You are a stranger, and you do not belong here.
She gets very menacing. She generates magic with her hands. Her whole posture changes.
Yep.
She was very, like, kind of loosey, sitcom-y before, and now she strikes like a menacing pose and steps up like, I'm going to protect what's mine. Yep. You're not going to touch these people. I don't know who you are, but you don't belong here.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So you have the aspect ratio go from 16:9 to when they're watching it to the sitcom, kind of like shrink, tall, skinny square. And then you have it go back to 16:9 and lose all the static to where it goes from like 70s to HD. And then she's like, no, you're gone. And she
Yeah.
throws her out of Westview.
Throws her out through like 4 different walls and a fence and
Yeah.
like knocking books over and chairs and.
Well, and so here's the funny thing. So Vision is literally outside. How did he not see or hear this happening? It's like she paused the outside world.
I would not be surprised if she didn't.
You know, I wouldn't be surprised. She throws her out of the thing, and it's daytime inside, and it's nighttime outside. So time flows definitely differently inside the bubble than it does outside the bubble. And and then she kind of like goes back into her happy little world, puts the facade back up,
fixes the walls,
fixes everything,
all the books back on the bookcase.
Yep. And we get all of that fun stuff. So we can see that she's kind of more in control than we thought she was. And then Vision walks back in, and we get the really big reveal of Vision is dead.
Yeah.
Which is
so creepy.
So creepy. So creepy.
Oh my gosh.
And, you know, completely devoid of color, has the big old hole where the Infinity Stone
Eyes
was.
lighted over. And he's like talking to her, and she's like, you could tell that she's trying to be like, no, I don't see this, I don't see this, I don't see this.
Exactly.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and then it's just there for like a couple of seconds, and then he's back to color.
Yeah, it was like a cutaway.
Yeah,
it was
so
while she was looking
good.
at it, she closed her eyes, she looks back, and he's fine.
Yeah, it was so weird. And then we end with, you know, Monica saying it was all Wanda. You know, all this was her, which is just so good. And then so then we get to the 5th episode.
Most recent episode.
Which,
so again, spoilers, pause here if you have not watched it yet. It only came out yesterday.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember what day today is.
Yeah, yesterday. We are recording this on Saturday, so if you have not watched it yet, please go watch it before you listen to us.
Go watch them all. Watch them again.
Yeah. So, episode 5 is on a very special episode, which I actually had to look up which sitcom this is. I believe it's Family Ties.
Okay. I can see that.
It's either Family Ties or it's Family Matters. I'm not sure which.
I think that they kind of loosely grab things from some several different episodes, because like the whole jazzercise bombshell hair kind of stuff, that was very like reminiscent of a lot of different shows. There are things that made me think about like half a dozen.
Yeah, I honestly thought this was the Roseanne episode. But based on the opening credit sequence for the sitcom, I think it's Family Ties, because it's very Family Ties.
I'd say that's probably like the heaviest influence.
Yeah.
And then they just kind of borrow from a few.
Yeah. So
like loosely interprets it.
Yeah, they're getting looser with their recreations, which I find interesting as we're going on. So, on this episode, Vision begins to see cracks in his reality and confronts Wanda about them. Meanwhile, the SWORD team launches an era-appropriate drone into Westview, and Wanda returns it to them. Meanwhile, Billy and Tommy learn something about life and death when they get a new dog. There's a lot of things that happen in this episode in a very short amount of time.
So much happened.
So, we start with Tommy and Billy as babies, right? And they won't cry. They won't stop crying. And we have a great little gag where Vision sticks the binkies in his ears, and it's like, oh, these aren't noise canceling.
Yeah, that was cute.
And so they literally say, I wish we had some help. And Agnes shows up very conveniently.
Perfect timing. Way to go, Agnes.
Gorgeous. Love it. And
she comes in, and Catherine Hahn's character, I've enjoyed that actress in a lot of things, but she is almost always the first one that makes you really feel the decade in this show. Yes. Like, you see the different costumes, you see the different set, But Wanda and Vision kind of act like themselves mostly.
Yeah,
exactly. So she's the first neighbor that you usually encounter, and she comes in very hard on the 80s. Like,
yeah, hardcore.
Yeah, hard on the 80s. Like, her hair, her jazzercise outfit.
Everything about her. Like, and even from her, like,
Buns of steel.
Parenting style, you know.
Yeah.
And Wanda tries to cheat a little bit and tries to magic the kids to sleep, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And at one point, Agnes goes and looks for, like, the dark liquor to put the kids to sleep, thinking that, okay, maybe they're teething, so we'll run a little alcohol in their gums to, you know, kind of help with that. Nope.
That was a very old school kind of parenting philosophy.
Oh, yes. I mean, God, with the leg warmers and everything.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we turn around and Agnes is having a drink at the bar, and it's quiet. And the twins have disappeared. And we turn around, and there are 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
So they can control their aging, which I find fascinating on so many levels.
And Agnes, they're so cute. They're cute little 5-year-olds.
Yeah, they are. Agnes makes a joke of, well, kids, you can't control them.
Yeah. Which obviously Wanda cannot.
No, not at all.
She tried to control them and has no control now.
Yeah. So then we switch back to Westview. So we start to see the cracks in reality as things are shifting in and out.
Before we switch to Westview, one of the cracks of reality was when Agnes came in.
Yeah.
Vision wasn't comfortable with her like holding the kids or touching them.
I forgot about that. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, this was really one of the first points when it breaks down and where Vision is really starting to be like, this is not right. Something's wrong here.
Yeah. And she goes, do you want me to take that from the top? And Wanda's like, huh?
She's like looking for a direction from Wanda.
Yeah.
And it sounds like an actress, you know? She's saying like, should I take that again? Do you want another take, basically?
Yeah.
And then she goes to pick up her bag again so like she could walk back into the room.
Yeah.
And so Vision is looking at her like, this is not how people act. Like, this isn't right.
Yeah, and he confronts Wanda about it. She's like, oh, she was just nervous.
Yeah. It's nothing, honey. It's nothing. It's fine.
It was a weird moment.
It was super weird. So that's one of the biggest things where it's been so obvious that this isn't right.
Yeah, exactly. So we get outside of Westview, and we see Monica going under a bunch of tests. They've got an MRI and some blood draws and stuff, and they are blank. Which is alluding to this is what causes her to have powers, because in the comics she does. I don't remember what they are off the top of my head, but I will research that for later this episode, for next week.
I've looked it up before.
So she's got some interesting ones. So then they're going through everything that has happened that they know of within the anomaly, and they go over Wanda's history as she is within the MCU. So born of Sokovia, radicalized after her parents were killed, and then volunteers for Hydra, which interesting moment. So in Ultron, they have that scene with her and Aaron Taylor Johnson playing Pietro side by side at the rally, and they very particularly framed that cut of her so it's just her by herself, and they don't show Pietro at all.
Yeah.
Now the cynical part of me is like, oh, they did it so they didn't have to pay him royalties. The other part of me is like, well, maybe they're going to recast Pietro. Maybe we're going to have a different version of Quicksilver going forward, which could be interesting. And so they go into kind of her backstory of she was with Strucker, and then she was with the Avengers, and then Logos happened, and da-da-da-da-da. And it's...
So you don't know really like her motivation at the moment.
Yes. And
they bring in both sides of it, that she's been the villain and she's also been the hero.
Yes. And they make a really interesting point of, does she have an alias? It's like, no. Does it have like a weird code name? No, not at all. And Hayward, like, a lot of people have speculated that he's the devil, that he's Mephisto. I think he's just a jerk. You know, I think we'll see Mephisto show up in other ways, because in the comics, Tommy and Billy are part of Mephisto's soul, and that's how they come into existence. And Monica's very much like, no, she's not a terrorist. She's, yes, she's controlling these people, but she's not trying to hurt anybody. In fact, she took great pains to not hurt me as she threw me out the barrier at 30 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So there is, she doesn't have a political agenda. I think she's just someone who is just stuck in her grief, and this is how it's manifested.
Yeah. If you take somebody who is as powerful as Wanda, and they've been through all of the amazingly horrific things that she has in her life, and then you add grief on top of that, you don't know what unresolved trauma she has from her parents dying, let alone her twin brother dying, and now her beloved dies. I don't know if they ever, were married or anything in this reality.
They were, together, basically.
They were together.
And you had that happened in Infinity War. You had her blip. Okay, for us it's been 5 years. For her, it's been 3 seconds. She then goes fights Thanos. Okay, almost destroys Thanos out of her grief. Okay, and this has been probably 2 weeks later, maybe. So there's some, this is a very, very short time period after Endgame.
It says what she does that we'll get to as it gets to in the story was 9 days prior to whatever our current day is. Yeah. So we're talking just a matter of a few days between the end of Avengers Endgame and really the beginning of what's happening here.
Yeah, exactly. So we cut back to the sitcom, and the twins looking so cute and so like, we just did something we shouldn't have.
Very cute and precocious 5-year-olds.
Yes. Standing in front of the sink, as a human shield.
As all precocious 5-year-olds do when they're not up to trouble.
Yeah, exactly. And Wanda comes in and going, which one of you just barked?
Yeah.
And of course they're hiding this very cute little dog, and Vision comes in like human, and he's like, I just have a feeling someone's gonna pop over, and Agnes comes in with a dog house, cause
naturally,
just so convenient,
Yeah, she noticed from her kitchen window that they had a dog, that they would need a dog house. Like, how'd you see that?
Yeah, right?
You didn't see that. My kitchen window does
And
nothing.
when Agnes isn't looking, Wanda creates a dog collar, and he's like, I thought we were supposed to hide our magic. And she was like, well,
yeah, she's not hiding anything anymore.
Yeah, she's like, I don't want to, I'm tired of hiding. I'm good. And she doesn't want him to either, which I find hilarious and adorable. And he's like, usually we're on the same mind, but right now we are not. And it's becoming very apparent that he's very, very suspicious. And so, they're like, can we keep the dog, please? Like all kids do. And we're like, no, you're not old enough. That. And they're like, not till you're 10. And they look at each other, and they're like, no, don't do it. And they age up to 10.
Yeah. So they are very much in control of themselves.
Oh, yes. 100%. 100%.
So now you don't know if it's something that it's Billy controlling his magic, or if it's Tommy speeding things up, or if it's a combination of both.
It might be a combination of both.
Yeah, but they are definitely the ones who are in control of their own aging and abilities within this. They also seem to have more control than Wanda does.
Yes, I agree.
Like Wanda, things go wrong when she tries to wave her hands around.
Yeah.
They don't seem to have that problem.
Yeah. And so because of that, I'm starting to lean towards it's Mephisto that's actually controlling this world. Yeah. Or at least boosting Wanda. Because she was never this powerful, at least in the MCU.
Yeah.
And
it could definitely, and that really harkens back to like the House of M comics, where a lot of these storylines kind of come from. They're at least inspired by them.
Yeah.
So you've got Mephisto and Agatha Harkness kind of playing behind the scenes puppetry.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of speculation's been with WandaVision, is that Agnes, the nosy neighbor that seems to kind of know what's going on, might be Agatha Harkness, that her unseen husband might be Mephisto. Like there's a lot of things that we still don't have answers for. Like really, how is this being created? Because it's the size of a whole town, and obviously we've been here for a duration of days now, at least.
Yeah.
And she created it 9 days prior to the current time frame in the real world. That's a lot of power to use for 9 days.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. You know, you've got these little anomalies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's being very selective in who it brings in and who it takes out. And because of that, there's some weird kind of hinky stuff going on. And it's starting to kind of show its stripes a little bit, you know. Agnes wears this brooch that has Mephisto on it and a couple other people. And I forget who they are off the top of my head.
I think she had something that like alluded to the Fates in one episode.
Something like that. And so
I heard
there's a
that.
couple of interesting little things, which if they are really running with the Tommy and Billy have parts of Mephisto's soul, it would make sense why they can control this world and why Wanda can't control them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a convergence of different powers and different things and different influences of the world. So from there, we jump back into outside of Westview. And you have my new favorite trio of Monica, Jimmy, and Darcy trying
side characters, but I love them, especially Jimmy's like optimism. He's just so fuzzy and cute.
Oh, he's adorable. So they're trying to theoretically figure out how and why they could get Monica back in knowing what she knows. And they bring up a couple of aerospace engineers. There's been some speculation that it's either the Pims or that it's Victor Doom. Which I'm leaning more towards Victor Doom or Reed Richards even, because Kevin Feige has said that the Fantastic Four will appear in a Disney Plus show before they appear in the movies.
That would be a great way to tie that in.
Right?
Like,
even if it's just like one little cameo, I'd be so happy.
Yeah. It's a great way to bring the world together and make it feel really cohesive instead of just dropping another movie.
Yeah.
Because like the first two Fantastic Four movies in like the 2000s, they were good. They weren't the best thing, but I liked them. And then that last one was just a train wreck.
Yes. It was
so bad.
It was so bad on so many levels.
Yeah.
So they're speculating about how Wanda's doing this. You know, she never was this powerful, and Monica's like, well, she did almost take out Thanos if, you know, he hadn't called the Blitz. And Jimmy was like, well, so did Captain Marvel. And something has happened because, oh boy, does Monica look uncomfortable and change the subject real quickly. So I am curious to see what happened there and what they're going to do with that.
I mean, there are decades between when we see Captain Marvel in her own movie and when we see her show up for Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So then they get, you know, the props and sets and stuff, and she sees the helicopter, and she's like, I wonder. So they go check out her clothes and come to find out, because she was wearing a Kevlar vest, her clothes are 87% Kevlar, which means that everything is taken in and is transformed going in. So they get this idea to do a 80s style drone and send that in.
Whatever they send in matches the 80s, then there's no reason to change it.
Exactly. And it flies under Wanda's radar for a little bit. So we then jump to Vision at work.
Dr. Westview.
Yeah, and and they get computers and they get their first email.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a communique from Sword.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And, we have this very little moment with Norm looking for a letter opener. It's like, no, we don't need to do that.
Yeah, it was all like bad computer puns at that point. Yes. It was great. He's like, where do I put the stamp?
Yeah, exactly. And the communique says, Dr. Darcy Lewis's findings regarding the maximum anomaly, high levels of radiation present at perimeter, effects on Westview residents unknown. Please advise.
Mm-hmm.
And it's at that moment, so Vision then touches the computer, and he's able to control the computer. So he touches Norm, breaks Norm out of the mind control, basically, and he freaks out. He's like, I'm in so much pain. The grief is so heavy. She's inside my head. I need to call my parents.
Oh, dark. And he's talking about his sister's taking care of his dad. He needs to be able to contact her.
Yeah.
It's obvious that he's there against his will.
Yeah. And, he's, everything hurts so much, that, all these thoughts and stuff are in his head, and that there's so much pain, which makes sense. And then he goes back and he flips him back to that kind of sitcom thing, and it's so, like, over the top cheesy. And kudos to the guy playing Norm, because that was a seamless transition.
Acting chops. He did such a good job with that scene.
And you get that kind of realization from Vision throughout that he may have to fight Wanda.
Yeah.
They may have to, go up against each other because he knows this isn't right. Scene. Yeah.
So we get back to Wanda with the boys next.
Yes.
And I loved this part, that the kids are trying to figure out why Vision went to work.
Yeah.
And they keep telling the mom, they're like, no, this morning it was Saturday.
Yeah.
Dad doesn't work on Saturdays. So you can see that Wanda's messing with Vision.
Yeah.
She mentions that she needed to distract him, so she sent him to work.
Exactly. And there's this really interesting moment where they're like, from us, and I'm like, no. We're just not on the same page, so I needed to distract him from our fight, basically.
Yeah.
And it's funny. So she realizes that something's not right, and then as soon as she gets up to go investigate what's going on outside, you hear the drone and the sound design, which I love so much. They were like, oh, let me throw in this little visual clue real quick, or this auditory clue real quick.
Yeah.
Which is just so great.
Which honestly just made me remember that there was an auditory cue at the beginning of this episode too, that every time that it started breaking down, like when Agnes walked in and got confused and was like looking for direction, the baby stopped crying.
Yep.
And it was only after they kind of restarted the scene that the babies were crying again.
Yeah.
So they're playing into all of those stereotypes too. Like there's a laugh track kind of running.
Exactly.
You
know? So we get this moment where Monica is flying this drone in, and she attempts to talk to Wanda, and we see Wanda with the red eyes, and Hayward, being the jerk that he is, decides to fire a missile at her, which,
like most jerks do.
I mean, I don't know why he thought it would be a good idea. Honestly, like, come on, the woman is a telekinesis genius.
Yeah.
Like, come on, son.
You're not going to take her by surprise.
Right? So the drone feed cuts out, and the broadcast also has a please stand by thing. And we get a perimeter breach. And we get Wanda walking out in her Endgame outfit, which proves the timeline.
Flowing, her Sokovia accent's back.
So you really could see, so this is how she went into it, and everything around that is her delusion, basically.
Yeah.
And,
although, to be fair, she very nicely returns the drone to them.
She really does. Like, she could have just, blown it up.
Yeah. I mean, just just really cares about recycling at this point.
It's
Just
so
brings
nice.
it back for them.
So nice, right? And, they've got probably 20 guns on her with sights, which is a really easy way to show numbers. And he's trying to justify the fact that they throw a missile at her. It's like, it was just a precaution,
Yeah, like you do.
Yeah. And Monica is trying to talk to her and be like, hey, what do you want? What do you need? She's like, I have everything I want. So leave me alone, basically.
Monica's trying to prove that she's a friend, that she's an ally for her. She's like, you let me help you deliver the babies. Yeah. Like, you knew that I was a friend.
Yeah. You let a sword agent into your house. And you're a telepath. Like, how did you not know who I was? And then she just walks back in. And as she walks back in, we see the static go red. Which it looks so cool.
Yeah. So it looks like she's reinforcing it, kind of more of a hands-off approach. She doesn't want to let everything in as easily as it's been getting in the past.
Yeah, exactly. And then we get the little commercial, which is for Lagos paper towels. When you make a mess, you didn't mean to.
Yeah, that is a deep cut, though.
Yes, it is.
I don't know.
That is like full on like Civil War. In fact, as soon as we get done with this, I'm gonna like rewatch all of the Wanda MCU movies.
Yeah.
I've got like 6.
Civil War and Ultron are the two best to really follow what's happening with her storyline.
Yeah.
But Lagos is where Wanda made her biggest mistake. And some civilians were killed. She was trying to protect people, but she kind of didn't have enough control or didn't think through the consequences.
Yeah, she took Crossbones up, wrapped him in the thing, and then she lost control and basically pushed the explosion into the side of a building, killing a bunch of people, and then we get the Sokovia Accords.
Yeah, so then the Sokovia Accords kicks off the entire Captain America Civil War movie.
It's a lot. There's a lot. We could do an entire episode just on that movie and that comic series, which we probably will do eventually.
Which I really need to read that series because the movie that's one of my bottom movies, just because I don't like the antagonism between characters I like.
Yeah,
so it's not my favorite of the movies, but
see, I enjoy it mostly because I'm a huge Black Widow fan, and I think this is one of Black Widow's better movies.
You aren't wrong there. She's got some great, especially action scenes.
Yes.
Isn't that the one where she's on the bike?
Yes.
And she picks up the shield as she rides past, and she's like, "I'm always picking up after you boys."
No, that's Ultron.
Oh, I thought
that is Ultron because they're going after Vision before he's Vision.
Yeah. No, you're right. That is an Ultron. Well, I do like that scene.
That's a good scene too.
That's
a good scene too. But so the Civil War comic is about Spider-Man, because he is being Spider-Man, and so they want him to do the whole registration thing, and it's a lot. But getting back to the episode,
yeah,
it's a lot. Next thing we see is them looking for the dog. The dog has disappeared. And we see Agnes bring out the dog from an azalea bush where he ate too much and died. Yeah. Which I'm starting to think Agnes killed the dog.
Well, I'm wondering at this point who created the dog in the first place.
Oh, that too.
So was it Agnes? Was it Wanda? Was it the kids? Was there a dog that got through the barrier? Like, where'd this dog come from?
Maybe a bit of both. It's a lot, honestly.
Yeah.
And they do have this great little moment where
oh my gosh,
they're like, no, don't
age yourself up.
Don't age yourself up. Don't run away from this hurt, basically.
Yeah. And the kids say something about, like, you can reverse this. You can bring him back to life. Yeah. And she's like, no, you can't do that. But that's exactly what she's doing.
Well, maybe her. Maybe Mephisto, maybe she wished
brought
it.
Vision back to life for this.
Yeah,
And she's sitting there telling them that, you've got to be sad about this. And they're like, no, Mom, you're strong enough. You can do this.
Yeah, exactly.
And so she's got to be like, no, I can't. Or I feel like she's been lying to herself throughout all of these episodes as well. She didn't realize maybe at first what she was doing. She doesn't know exactly how much control she has. And then as she's figuring it out, she's like, but you know what? I'm happier here. And so she's trying to kind of like choose it for herself. Yeah. There's a whole lot going into it.
Yeah. Well, and then we get into the next scene, which is the big WandaVision confrontation argument.
Yeah.
Which is a lot.
They both strike attack poses and float up. Yeah. Oh, so good.
So good. And he's like, I spoke to Norm away from your oversight. That, and she tries to kind of force it by running the credits. And he's like, no, we are not done talking.
He keeps chasing her into the other room, and then the credits stop.
Yeah. And he's like, what do you want to do? Watch TV, turn in for the night so you can change everything? No. You cannot control me. And he's like, I don't know who I am.
Yeah.
Which,
so good.
There is a sweet little moment where she's like, you are my husband, you are Tommy and Billy's father, isn't that enough?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, the feels.
She's trying so hard to keep her idealized version of them together.
Yeah.
And this is the first point when he points out the fact that when they go to bed, they wake up and everything's redone.
Yeah.
That was the first time that I realized, like, we knew that everything was a different decade, but this is the first time that you really get the idea that they know it's a different decade too.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, is she going through all of the American TV shows that she saw, that she's trying to find the one that's going to fit them?
Yeah.
Where they're going to be happy?
Maybe.
So maybe that's why we had a 50s and a 60s and a 70s episode, that she's going through trying to find what's right for them, because the sets change, the characters change. And so it feels more like a conscious decision than I gave it credit for.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So they get into their attack poses, which is so great, and I love it. Like, it's such seamless wire work. I give the kudos to the set guys. And she's like, all of this is for us. Like, everything that I am doing is for us. So let me do it.
Yeah.
And, he's becoming aware of what's outside Westview. And there was a scene in the trailer where he was the one opening the barrier. And I'm wondering if that was a fake out for the Wanda scene where she brings the drone out. But then again, who knows? It may be later.
There's a few things from the trailer we haven't seen yet. Sure. So it's going to be exciting to see. We're already halfway through the entire season. Yeah. So it's... And I don't know if there's going to be a second one. It might have just been like a mini series to set up.
I don't think so, because this is playing into Spider-Man 3 and then Doctor Strange 2. It may not be. We may get another WandaVision series. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Oh, maybe. I love the format. I love what they're doing with it.
Oh yeah,
it's been so good for me.
And there's this great little part in their fight where they're like, so you think I'm somehow in charge of everyone in Westview, that I get them to school on time, that I get them to doctor's appointments, that I make them walk their dogs? And she's like, I have no idea how any of this started.
Yeah.
And he wants to believe her, but he can't.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just like, you need to stop, basically. And the doorbell rings. And she's like, I didn't do that. And he's like, I want to believe you, but I'm ignoring statistics.
Oh my gosh.
And
this is so good.
It's one of those moments like, all right, who's at the door? Like, because it seems too perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like, okay, this is the sitcom. And she opens the door and she has no idea who it is at first. And he's like, who is it? And she's like, I don't know. And so we pan and we see
the back of the
head and silver and black, and I'm going, ooh, okay.
And we're like, oh my gosh.
And we pan around and it's the first class Pietro.
Quicksilver.
Quicksilver
But from the X-Men cinematic universe.
Which I will find
Evan
his
Peters
name
is
here in a sec.
Evan Peters is the actor name.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And, you know, can't long lost bro get a squeeze? And I love Darcy's reaction, which is she recast Pietro.
Yeah.
And I was yelling at my TV when he popped on. I was
so excited.
Yes! Like, I was like, sweet, we're gonna get the first class X-Men thing, right? However,
that's the obvious go-to here.
However, after rewatching it a couple of times, I don't think he's playing Pietro. I think he's using Pietro as his in. I think he's either Nightmare or he's Mephisto himself.
Dun, dun, dun.
Right? And that's how the episode ends.
Because he doesn't act like Marvel Cinematic Universe Pietro. He doesn't have an accent.
And he also didn't act like he did in First Class.
Exactly. He doesn't have any of the same mannerisms.
Yeah.
He's very much X-Men Quicksilver, which is kind of goofy, kind of like, hey, let's play ping pong. Blah, blah, blah.
He doesn't have the goggles and the Walkman and all of that stuff. So that's one of the reasons why I'm starting to think, okay, he's not,
then maybe he's not any Quicksilver.
Yeah.
Wow, that is a thought.
Right? Now, I'll admit, I can't take credit for it. I did hear it first on Beyond the Trailer when I was watching her breakdown. Yeah. But it got me thinking, and I was like, you may be right. It would make sense. I
haven't watched any like Easter eggy breakdowns for this last episode.
Gotcha.
But what I'm thinking about is I see him, and it occurred to me, and I messaged this to you, that they're in the 80s.
Yeah.
So if she was looking for a Pietro from the 80s, she would get the First Class Pietro.
Exactly.
Because that the Apocalypse movie and Dark Phoenix, all of that era takes place in the 80s.
Yep.
Like Jubilee's a teenager in an American mall, and Cyclops and Jean Grey are teenagers. And Quicksilver is in that movie. Like, he goes to the school and saves everyone from the explosion.
Yeah.
He is the Quicksilver that you would find if you were in the 1980s.
Yeah,
and
that
was really a fun little deep
interesting things. When we were chatting in our spoiler section in our Discord server, one of the guys was like, I really hope she hasn't like jumped off the deep end yet, because I don't want Wanda to be a villain. And I was like, I don't think she's actually being villainous like she is in the comics. I think she's just stuck in her grief, literally. And this is kind of how it's manifesting, and she's just in the biggest case of denial the world has ever seen.
Yeah, and there's still unanswered questions. So I think even with the fact that she's controlling some of the details, I think that there's still another layer to this story that we don't know. I mean, there's still a few more episodes that...
Well, I totally forgot. We didn't even mention when they were doing the breakdown of who Wanda is, they showed 9 days after the blip, she stole Vision from Sword.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, he was not put together. He was in pieces. So, my theory is that she stole it, and they claim it's because, she violated the Sokovia Accord, she violated the Vision's living will.
Yeah, the Vision didn't want to be used as a weapon.
Yeah.
And so they're saying that she took him and is doing whatever she's doing, and that's violating his living will.
Yes.
You also don't know what they were doing with him.
Well, yeah, and so there is a thing about, like, and they very specifically mentioned that she violated Section 37B of the Sokovia Accords, and I'm like, that's a very oddly specific section to be referencing. So my theory is that they were using Vision to create things and to create weapons, which is why she got pissed off and took him back. And then that kind of kicked off everything else. She's
only personally a few days after losing him in the first place.
Yep.
And her basically her last memory before the blip was that she was forced to try to kill him.
Yep.
And then it was instantly reversed, and then Thanos killed him, and then she tried to kill Thanos, and then she's been gone.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a pretty traumatic thing to go through. She comes back from that only to fight Thanos and his armies, and then a couple days later, she steals his body and creates this magical world.
Well, I mean,
like,
from her point of view, okay, she comes back from the blip and finds out it's been 5 years, and Sword has been doing God knows what to her love of her life. Like, I don't blame her for going crazy.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, she's already got so much trauma in her past that you don't know how this is affecting her.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of grief has gone into this. So there are things at play that we still just don't know. There's still so many ways that this could play out. Yeah. The next few episodes are going to be really interesting to see where they decide to take this story.
Yeah.
And how it's going to play into those movies that we know are coming up.
Yeah. Now, I haven't looked at them because I'm trying to avoid spoilers, so I've been avoiding the internet. Yeah. But apparently there are spoilers out there for the next episode.
I haven't looked either.
I don't want to look.
Yeah.
I'm like, nope, I'm going to be good.
I want to be surprised.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Like, I want to know when I'm watching it, yelling at my TV at, 11 o'clock in the morning, whether or not I'm right with my theories.
Yeah. We might be wildly wrong, but we're going to be excited to find out.
I mean, honestly, like, I've had a weirdly good year for Disney Plus shows when it comes to, like, theories that I have being right. Like, I was completely right with The Mandalorian about Bo-Katan and Ahsoka.
Nice.
And I've been right so far with this show about Darcy being involved, so I'm hoping I'm right.
Nice.
So we'll see. Wow, we have gone really long. We're almost at 2 hours.
Well, we expected to be about 2 hours for the first one because we had 5 episodes to get through.
This is true. And I'm sure there was more stuff that we missed that we'll talk about as we get to other episodes.
These are the things that were important to us.
Yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot in all of these episodes. But yeah, so thank you guys so much for joining us. We are going to be releasing this on Mondays, both on YouTube and on your favorite podcasting site. This has been the Bounty Honeys present Comics Corner. Thank you guys so much.
We should tell you to join our Discord server.
Yes, it will be in links down below.
Stuff, places, and areas. We've got merch.
Yes.
We'll have links for that too. Especially in the Bounty Honey server, we've got a spoiler zone where we do talk about things like immediately after watching them. So come hang out with us and ask us questions and let us know maybe some other shows or movies or things that you want to talk about in this kind of format, because obviously we love them all.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, thank you guys so much for joining, and stay geeky.
Bye.